most likely some of these people who express fears about being around transgender people have probably been around transgender people and have shared spaces with transgender people. They just might not have known it.
It was somebody from Washington, D.C. who had never spoken to me. Had to Google who she was, as I got this. And I was like, cool, so this is disingenuous, and this is arbitrary, and this is not on performance. This is across-the-board termination.
The thing that has to happen first, before we take any policy initiatives, is we have to change hearts and minds, and we have to basically uncover the history, a history that's been lost and obscured. Just the idea that Jim Crow was regional is basically what most people think, and it wasn't.
Welcome back to the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. The stock market has rebounded somewhat since last week, but there are still many Michiganders concerned about the state of our economy. They're worried about what the tariffs will do to their business and how the uncertainty is making it difficult to plan ahead. And this is especially true of auto suppliers. In a recent Motor and Equipment Manufacturers Association survey, nearly 1/4 of auto suppliers said their companies would cut or delay investments during the first month of the tariffs. Roughly 21% of suppliers said modifications to supply chains would be needed, and 13% said cutting U.S. jobs would be required. What does the job of an auto supplier look like day to day, and how are they trying to manage this uncertain moment? And what would tariffs on auto supplies mean for you and me? Lori Harbour is a partner and automotive analyst at Wipfli, a tax and advisory firm in Southfield. She's been working with auto suppliers for over 3 decades. Lori, welcome to the Metro.
Thank you for having me.
And we also want to hear from you, our listeners. Do you work in the auto industry? How do you think the tariffs will affect your work? The number is 313-577-1019. Lori, broadly speaking, what has the reaction to these tariffs been like from auto suppliers in Michigan? What are people in the industry saying to you?
Well, it's quite mixed today. There's a lot of anxiety and just so much, as you said, uncertainty and sort of chaos to run your business. So you're trying to maneuver around what's going on, what's happening, how does it affect me, and then how do I plan? So that chaos has just created such anxiety within most suppliers, regardless of size.
Chaos, uncertainty, anxiety. I mean, here on the Metro, we've been hearing that from multiple industries that stand to be affected by tariffs. But for this industry of auto suppliers, put it into context for us. There are over 100,000 auto supplier jobs in Michigan. What kinds of things do they do, and how much money do they collectively make each year?
Well, of course, it varies in size. We have very large tier 1 suppliers that support the original equipment manufacturers like a General Motors and a Ford, Stellantis. So those are big billion-dollar companies, all the way down to small $5 and $10 million companies that are making small parts or automotive tools, injection molds, or stamping dies for these companies. So it varies based on who they supply and what type of parts they supply. But as you look at the industry in general, I mean, they're all trying to figure out, how do I deliver parts on time in a market where automotive has been relatively soft in the last, 12 to 24 months. In other words, sales have not returned to the pre-COVID levels. So adjusting to reduced volumes and now considering, where do my parts come from? Where do my parts go? Meaning, do they leave the country? Will they have a tariff effect? And how will it impact my revenue and my profit?
And then looking down the supply chain, I'm wondering how you think these tariffs on auto supplies could affect people who, let's say, are in the market to lease or buy a new car.
Yeah, of course, tariffs create, added cost. So for us as consumers, the price of vehicles, if the tariffs continue in this automotive tariff of 25% that is not compliant with USMCA and other tariffs across countries that will ship parts here to go into vehicles. As those tariffs start to accumulate, we will see an increase in price of vehicles. And today we're already at about $48,000 on average for a car. So if you think about $3,000 to $5,000 additional across vehicles, and largely some of those more economical vehicles like an Equinox or a Ford Escape or things of that nature, making the price of vehicles much higher for the average consumer who's already struggling to afford, such a high-priced vehicle.
So then buying a car is out of reach for a lot of normal folks now, completely out of reach, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, the average purchaser of a vehicle is well into the six-figure family, $130,000 to $150,000, and that's just not the average salary of a middle America homeowner or consumer.
Right.
So it's very much out of the reach, and then it turns into the used car market, which is also still very expensive.
And this is a global industry. I want to talk about Magna International, which is a huge auto supplier out of Canada. The CEO of that company, Swami Kotajiri, spoke yesterday with Jamie Butters on his Automotive News Daily Drive podcast about how his company is doing amid the tariffs. And here's what he had to say.
Look, our industry is cyclical, but it's a long cycle. So when you're talking about investments today, we are talking about production being in 27, 28. So there is a lot of angst and discussion on those topics because the timing of trying to hit the start of production doesn't change. And, in our industry, if you go back, it's day to day. So given the uncertainty, there is those discussions.
So, Lori, Swami is concerned about something that you already mentioned, which is inconsistency, specifically with which economic decision-making is happening in the White House. So do you find that auto suppliers are broadly most concerned about that inconsistency? Is that weighing most heavily on them?
That's absolutely correct. That inconsistency and uncertainty affects my ability to make an investment decision. And do I choose to move my plant out of Mexico back to the U.S., which could take me 2 years? That's his point of 27, 28. It would take me a long time to move and resource to a new plant. And then by then, it could be completely different. Or, a company like General Motors, do they move a plant from Mexico to the U.S., which would take 2 to 3 years? And by then, President Trump may not be in office. So it's just the inconsistency affects their investment decisions considerably.
It's feeling really messy. Lori, in terms of the tariffs themselves, some auto suppliers are concerned that they'll cause a demand for auto parts to decrease as the number of cars made decreases. Now, UGN is an auto supplier out of Illinois. The CEO of that company, Peter Anthony, recently told the Wall Street Journal that demand for parts from auto suppliers will decrease. Is that the biggest concern that you hear from auto suppliers when it comes to the tariffs themselves?
It is certainly one of the largest. If we have a situation where the uncertainty and the increased cost of vehicles and in turn price to the consumer occurs, and remember these tariffs are coming from multiple directions, not just the auto tariff, but the China tariffs and all of the things combined that stack together, that will reduce car sales. So we've already seen forecasters reduce their plan for 25 from somewhere around 16.5 to well below 16, almost 15.5. So when we take 1 million units out of the forecast for 25, that's 1 million less, parts and a lot of impact to revenue, which will reduce profits on top of added cost. Everybody's cost has gone up, labor cost and material cost. So you're shrinking margins, which will put some companies in a challenging situation for the future.
This is the Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. We're talking about how the tariffs might impact auto suppliers in Michigan. Our guest is Lori Harbour, partner and automotive analyst at Wipfli. That's a tax and advisory firm in Southfield. She's worked with auto suppliers for decades, and we want to hear from you. Do you work in the auto industry? How do you think the tariffs will affect your work? The number is 313-577-1019. Now, you mentioned that the supply of cars is just one concern when it comes to the tariffs. What are the other concerns that you're hearing about, Lori?
Well, the concern broadly is, as we talked, the uncertainty, but then where do I buy the parts that I need to produce my components? So if I'm a tier one supplier to General Motors or Ford, I may be buying certain materials overseas, not necessarily just China, but maybe Europe or India, or getting some rare earth minerals that we don't have, or how about semiconductors that we don't produce here yet in the U.S.? So I have to buy these things. Then the question becomes, can I pass that on to my customer? Will General Motors or Ford take the increased cost? And so I need to map my supply chain. I need to understand what my backup sources are. And if it is too untenable from a cost standpoint to buy overseas, where do I buy it here? And do I have capacity here? And is there labor willing to take on that additional capacity? So a lot of discussion from the administration that we'll be adding a lot of jobs, but I'm somewhat suspect whether we'll add that many jobs because, one, I'm not sure we have people to do them, but also we have a lot of open capacity here today, and we can put some of these parts in there without adding a lot of labor. So just lots to think about if you're a supplier in terms of your supply chain.
You're painting a picture here, Lori, of everything really slowing down, and that has me thinking about how a lot of economists are now discussing the real possibility of a recession. Here's CEO Swami Kotajiri again on the Automotive News Daily Drive podcast.
There is discussions about it, but it's not as severe yet. But I think you can see it, right? You can see call it the fault lines. And if this continues, yes, it's going to be similar to what we saw in 2008, 2009, or maybe, during the COVID crisis, right? Or during that time frame.
Lori, what are you hearing in your sphere from auto suppliers about the possibility of a recession?
Well, to be frank, most of my automotive suppliers have felt like they've been in a recession for the last 2 years. The volumes have been down at a level that is, again, not pre-COVID levels, and slower and inconsistent demand for volume. Some weeks them asking for 1,000 parts, the next week asking for 500. So inventory levels have been a challenge. And so definitely I agree with him. There's a lot of talk about it. I don't think we're there yet, but I do think there is a potential that we can continue with the way the economy has struggled and the adjustment that the Fed is trying to do with interest rates and employment and unemployment and how that balances inflation. And so if the consumer continues to struggle to pay, wages have not gone up at the rate of inflation. We do a survey as well, and we just surveyed 300 people who said their volume is expected to be down considerably in 2025, which will then in turn affect profits. So I do think things will continue to remain slow. I was bullish that the back half of the year would start to see some uptick because inventory levels are low, which would then tend to turn to demand. But with the current tariff scenario, that's just created more of that uncertainty for the consumer as well. So I think it's a very real scenario that we would have a potential light recession. I don't think it'll be 2008 or 2009, but certainly continuing to balance the economy in this sort of post-COVID environment, which is weird to talk about 5 years later, but we still are kind of adjusting from that.
Right. The effects of the pandemic have been cascading. We're still feeling them in multiple ways. We do have to flip the coin here. We would be remiss not to discuss the possible benefits of tariffs to auto suppliers. What good for American auto suppliers could come out of really large tariffs on China and smaller but significant ones on Mexico and Canada?
There's no doubt there are positive aspects of some of these tariffs. We're already seeing from some of our, what I'm going to call a tier 2 or a tier 3 supplier. These are people who then support the big billion-dollar tier 1 automotive suppliers that then go into a subsystem for OEMs. They're seeing quote activity increase considerably in the last 3 months or so, as the tariffs have been looming. And so many people are asking them to quote things that they never would have quoted. It would have typically been in China or some overseas region. I spend a lot of time in the automotive tool and die space. So every single part on the car requires an injection mold or a stamping die or a die cast tool. This is a market that's been just devastated by low-cost country China for the last 20 years. They're seeing a lot of opportunity to make it's a one-time, manufacturer of a tool, and they're seeing opportunity. Now, they have to seize that opportunity. We have to be very competitive still. We're never going to be as competitive as China, but we need to not try to take advantage of the product or the customer that now needs us to make a tool here. We need to be competitive and build that relationship back, prove why we need to make tools in our country and even parts, right? Parts that come back here. We still have to be competitive. So there will be tremendous opportunity. We're already seeing that. We have to seize the day, grab hold of that new business and make a customer relationship that we can have forever.
Lori, in the last 30 seconds or so that we have here, if you were in charge and you wanted to use tariffs to create more production and jobs here, but not kill people with higher prices, how would you advise the president to use tariffs?
I believe that tariffs is one tool for success of building our manufacturing base, and I would do it in a little slower, more methodical, planned approach. I certainly understand the reason to balance the trade across the globe, but doing it in a more strategic and slow approach that allows companies to plan. And I would also ask for customers, meaning the large companies, the General Motors, the Whirlpools, the John Deeres, to make a commitment to build in America, to choose 25% or 30% of their initial capital to be deployed in this country to our manufacturing base. And after that, go and build elsewhere if that's what you need to do to balance cost and price. But we have solid companies here that if we don't make customer commitment, we will lose them. And then that base will continue to go to other regions of the world. So with a small commitment by customers and a balanced approach to tariff and trade, I think we can really keep a very thriving manufacturing and middle market America for jobs, because they're great jobs, really great jobs.
Lori Harbour is a partner and automotive analyst at Wipfli. That's a tax and advisory firm in Southfield. Lori, thanks so much for joining us on the Metro.
Thank you for having me. It was great.
From the WDET newsroom and all of us at WDET, we're inviting you to join us for the Judy Adams Celebration of Life Memorial. It's an evening honoring her impact on music, culture, and on WDET. The event is Saturday from 5 to 8 at Detroit's Garden Theater. There will be live music from Sean Blackman and DJ sets by Ishmael Ahmed. The event will be free and it's open to everyone. And this week on the Metro, producer Carrie Jr. II spoke with Essential Music host Ann DeLisi and Adams' son, Anthony Minnie, on his mother's life, legacy, and love of music. You can hear that conversation and RSVP for the Judy Adams Celebration of Life Memorial at WDET.org. And in sports, the Tigers lost to the Brewers 5-1 in Milwaukee. Spencer Torkelson hit his 6th home run of the season for Detroit. The Tigers return to Comerica Park for the start of a 4-game series against the Kansas City Royals tonight. In the NHL, the Red Wings beat the Devils 5-2 in New Jersey. Detroit wraps up another disappointing season against the Maple Leafs in Toronto tonight. Up next, many people in Michigan are concerned about how Trump's tariffs will impact the economy in our state. We'll hear about why from a labor professor. This is The Metro. Stay with us.